So Jules, can you give us an example of a project that you've worked on that has gone well, and why?
I'm going to start with that example that didn't go so well, because my colleague Javid is on the call. Yes, he is. Kia ora, Javid. So a little while ago, we were funded to do a project which was trying to increase the diversity in bowling clubs. Put your hand up if you've ever spent time at a bowling club. Yes, yes, yep. And put your hand up if it's quite a diverse community, if you've seen like lots of diversity in bowling clubs. No. So we were funded some money to try and increase the diversity space in bowling clubs. And Javid, who's on this call, was working, he was that project lead for that project. And we, Javid, you can jump in if you'd like, but we failed miserably. We failed miserably in the fact that we could not shift the systemic kind of issues that were in the bowling clubs to try and create kind of these community spaces because of the way in which they were set up. But what we did succeed at is we succeeded in learning so many things of how we can change the system. So I guess it's a positive and negative. Javid, do you want to talk to that just really quickly?
Yeah, just really quickly. Sorry, my daughter might babble in the background. Yeah, I mean, we found that, you know, getting our Indian and Pacifica communities into these lawn bowls clubs was great, and they would come in and play. But getting them to sustainably participate was a difficulty because of the systems that they had there. And you had to be a member, and you had to pay X, you had to do Y, and that's where the project really kind of fell over in a sense.
And the thing, like one of the reasons why lawn bowls was chosen was because if you've played lawn bowls, it's quite an inclusive sport. You don't need to learn a lot of rules to begin with, and it creates a really good opportunity or amazing opportunity to come together in a space. So that's an example of kind of what hasn't worked so well, but also an example of kind of what not to do next time, or how do we enable like better opportunities for next time. I'm going to, back to you, Gia.
Oh no, I was just going to ask, I suppose a question just to go in from there is, was it that, you know, obviously you've just said that they had all these rules and regulations and memberships. Is it because the group that you were working with was just completely rigid? And did they were, like you're saying, they were chosen to be diverse, but did they want to be diverse?
So from a sport background, anyone who knows sports clubs know that sport's dying. So lawn bowls especially don't want to say dying, but the sports bowls clubs are not necessarily sustainable anymore because of their patronage aging. And so they know that they need to diversify in which the way that diversify the offering. But when it came down to, hey guys, we have this opportunity, they weren't able to shift the way in which they were thinking to be able to enable that diversity or the change in way they were working to happen.
Okay. I could dig deeper on that, but I think we probably know the audience. So
I think we all know what was going on.
Yeah, so it is interesting. So that is, you know, it's interesting that it was that sport that got chosen. I'm going to move to Frith. Frith, do you want to talk about, I'm going to have to go back to Jules, so I'm going to go Frith, and then I'm going to go back to Jules later on to find out one that did work. But over to you, Frith. Tell us one that did work and one that didn't, if you like.
I'm going to copy Jules because I want her to think I'm cool, and go for a didn't first, and because you'll all know it, Innovating Streets. We had 4 projects for Innovating Streets as part of Waka Kotahi's initiative that happened sort of from last year, and 2 of them went spectacularly not good for us. In the papers, you can find this, look on social media, including some of our project leads getting death threats. So a really, really good, I know I'm crossing placemaking and tactical urbanism here, but just, and so many reasons why it wasn't good and not good for community, and lots and lots of reasons. So the one I'm going to choose as the reason that I'm most interested in at the moment is because we were trying to run a tactical urbanism process alongside a very traditional project management process. And there was a real set of tensions there, and that means that, you know, maybe things could be done a bit better and a bit differently. So heaps of learnings, and a lot of damage. And yeah, we're sort of you know, we're in these communities for really long periods of time, so it's not okay to have done something that has done hurt. So we've got to find ways now to heal that and move forward. So yeah, a spectacular, not great, and some really lovely stories of great in the midst of that as well. So I've only named 2 projects because another one's actually going quite nicely, but that one, I know Innovating Streets was a large topic for a lot of us all across the country. Is it all right to leak to a went well?
No, do you mind if I just scratch the surface on that a little bit? Because I don't know, I'm going to hesitate and say, was Henderson one of those ones that, just because I live there, and my observation, and I don't know whether it's not going to be a death threat, but was just that, and it goes for the whole of Auckland, but particularly West Auckland, is that we don't have alternatives of good transport. Like, you know, our transport is atrocious, and we're not particularly great on cycling lanes. We've got this amazing cycling lane on the Northwest Motorway, which is hugely used, and apparently e-bikes are taking off in the area. But like, I mean, I live west, and I live in inaccessible bits, and I find it incredibly difficult to use public transport, and I would even use an e-bike, but again, I live on quite dangerous roads. So for both of those reasons, and I'm such a greenie, it's probably my worst thing. Like, you know, the best I get is maybe using an e-car, but is that an issue? Is that, like, we just don't have that infrastructure there, and that to some degree may hinder placemaking in general, like not necessarily transport, but, you know, like that we try and make these changes without the infrastructure.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge what Shaz, hope I said your name right, put in the chat, that it became political, and that connects, I think, with what you're saying there is our politicians ended up in really, really awkward positions, because we are asking, I did stick something on LinkedIn and a few weeks afterwards, we are asking people to reconsider how they're traveling for the good of the climate. But our systems are not ready for that yet, and we're dealing with infrastructure that is heavily car dependent, and for some people that is the option they need. So really tricky. How do you, there's a build it and they will come, or get it built so they can use it sort of thing. But for some people that change is really difficult, and especially at a time in COVID where businesses are on their knees, as someone said to us. Sorry, I feel like I need to temper death threat with horrible text messages, just in case I've gone too far and it actually wasn't as serious as a death threat, but I know there was quite serious things going on. But I think this is one of the great challenges of our city, is how do we, forgive me, I am 100% on the side of less private cars and more bicycles. We have to, if we want oxygen for our great-grandchildren, we're going to need to think about how we travel, but how does that boil down to real change in our town centres that are really struggling right now? It's a really difficult thing for us to be grappling with. Again, why this word placemaking can help us hopefully come together around a place and have a conversation about what do we need here. You know, what is the best thing for us all for the long term.
I'm just reminded that, and I don't know if I'm slightly veering off. So our next event is called Business Activism, and one of the areas that we have used is to talk about transport. And I don't know if anybody on this call has ever listened to Paul Winton talk about transport. And he's quite amazing in that he says that he uses the word repurposing, which is obviously my favorite word. And he repurposes the roads, that the idea that we, you know, if we change our roads to have more cycle lanes and more buses, and we put the money into buses rather than having to build trains and infrastructure, we just shift the funding away from roads to buses, and, you know, and maybe subsidies towards electric bikes. So actually it's a little bit of a carrot as well as the stick. But if you are interested in that, that is in our next one, but it does kind of hit on what you're talking about, because I agree with you, we do need to do something. It's just, it's the how. Is it possible to talk about something that was positive, a good example?
Oh yeah, look, and I've been going, which one? Choose one, Frith, quick, hurry up, choose one. And I'm going to, I want to say anything that we've done where we're working at the speed of trust is where we've done well. And so I really want to choose the Rangatahi development program that we're doing, which is an apprenticeship program for for young placemakers to work alongside mainly our waterfront team. And we're not there yet. We're still working out how to do it. But the reason it's amazing is because it's such an incredible learning curve. It's such an incredible opportunity for Eke Panuku to think about how it partners with mana whenua in the making of place. And it is just these amazing, I just feel old and uncool. So I don't go to meetings because I just bring the whole tone down. Just amazing people who made an event called Homie down on the waterfront. We luckily got that in before lockdown. So just a complete eye-opener in terms of what happens when mana whenua rangatahi talk placemaking, and what does that do to our impression of this word as Auckland Council's regeneration agency. So that's one that's very dear to my heart at the moment. Not my work, a whole lot of other clever people making it happen, but yeah, that'd be right up the top of the list.
So that co-design, or like the what is it, the ABCD, what is it, asset-based community development, where it's from the bottom up. Yeah.
What we've said is it's an opportunity for rangatahi to come and learn placemaking alongside us Eke Panuku placemakers, but also it's an opportunity for us Eke Panuku placemakers to understand what it means to relate to place from mana whenua rangatahi perspective. How does mātauranga Māori actually influence our work? That's the purpose. So yeah, pretty exciting. Big work, really exciting. Very grateful for all of those on that one.
Excellent. Over to you, Denise. You can start positive or negative. Which one is going to go?
Well, I've got so much to say, but I'd really like to echo what both Jules and Frith are saying. It's very ako, right? It's when you work in placemaking, as you're both learning and teaching, or giving and taking, and that's when it's successful, I think. And I love that term, Frith, the speed of trust. I think that's part of the issue perhaps with the innovating streets, is that wasn't given enough precedent, and we couldn't move at the pace of communities and the pace of systems as well. So there's some real cultural, if you like, how we do things around here kind of culture that goes with placemaking that helps it to be successful or not. And I also think, this sounds a bit kind of sitting on the fence, that, you know, in some ways there's no failures, you're always learning. And I know that sounds really lame, but within the bigger projects, like Pascal is on the corner, and one of the successes, I would say, which is an old bowling club, would be Gribblehurst Community Hub as placemaking in many ways. But it's also had some real challenges and some fails, you know, and actually the failures have been just as important as the successes. And there've been numerous of them over a period of time. I think one of the fails for me perhaps was a little project that I did with a number of neighbours. I think there was about 12 people came together to say, how can we activate place in the Kingsland Morningside kind of area? And we had a workshop and got a whole lot of good ideas, and people came back to develop some ideas. The group divided by half. And then by half again, when we did a walk around to look at some places, and we settled on a reserve, which it doesn't even seem to have a name. It's kind of opposite the Morningside train station on New North Road. It's got some big trees in it. And then there were only 2 of us that actually ended up activating that. So in a sense, it was a fail in that people didn't come through. And we put a thing called a poet tree there. We made out of recycled core flute, Kathy Casey's election sign, actually, a whole lot of words like you might put on your fridge, and strung them around the tree, and people could make up little poetry and put it there. And the first, so there was only 2 of us then at that point, so everyone else had dropped off. But the first day when we were putting it up there on this big, I think it's a puriri tree, I can't even remember now, a guy came along and he got really into making up these words as we're going, and I got talking to him, and then he went, and he expletive, I have to go, I'm late for my PD. So he was doing PD for graffiti, and there he was working on our poetry, which was kind of nice. But even better, there were 3 women, and one in a flat above, one in a really big flash house, and one in a flat further down on New North Road, who ended up looking after and curating that tree. So was it a fail or was it not? How do we measure success as a whole other kind of thing? But it was hard work, and it fell to the shoulders of a few, and I think it comes back to the readiness, if you like, of the community. But sometimes you've got to lead by doing up front, and Gribblehurst was a bit like that as well. We had an opportunity to put a tender in, and it took 9 months, and that 9 months was a bit torturous in the tender process too. But that tender process meant I met 50 local people who, when we did get the key, and actually Auckland Council staff said they preferred Basketball Auckland to have that facility, we could have a co-design session within a week. And what we thought would be the first thing off the block would be something like classes for children was not. It was all about the kitchen and a whole bunch of things, and it went like that. So it's really difficult for me to say this failed and this didn't, because there's a bit of both in all of it. And some of it is about it's quite exhausting to be present to that all the time, but it's also really exhausting, but absolutely essential to be humble. We are very much ako in this space. No one holds all the threads. Again, that sounds probably really lofty, but that's my real learning here, is that failure and success go hand in hand, and together we make a difference. They make a difference.
Come on, unmute myself. Wise words. Yeah, I agree. I think failures, and actually I think with some failures that they can fail for other things, like not the right time, not the right place, not the right people. And you can go back again and revisit. And there are times where with that hindsight, or, you just you hit it at a different angle and it might be slightly different and better. And then you hit it again at another different angle. I kind of feel sometimes it can be like a chemistry experiment. It takes a few goes before you get this magic formula. And then when you get the magic formula and you've done it times, then you go, okay, well, this is a formula. This actually works. If we do, and I've had that experience for different projects, and always, I think it's the idea of perseverance to go back and kind of, because it's not, like you say, it's not wrong. It's just, it's been tackled in a different way.
And adaptation, I think, if we keep banging the same, using the same tool, you'll get the same result, but we need to adapt. But timing is everything, a whole bunch of things. And actually, if there's not a bit of pain when we're doing change work, then we're probably not doing change work. So if we're using placemaking in that space, which we certainly are, there will be pushback. And then it's okay to say, okay, I've gone too hard, let's compromise here and go back, or let's change tack here. It's a process as much as an outcome or an output, in fact, more so in many ways. And you can grow a whole lot of champions as you go in that way. You don't have to have all the answers. I think that's much harder to do when you're Eke Panuku or the Western Initiative, because you're supposed to get it right, first go and there.
Can I jump in on that? So so we've talked a lot about failure, and I think that's because by human nature, like me personally, myself, like failure is a space to learn and to grow, and what's not going to work anymore, and so you try different tactics. I really liked when Frith said trust. So you go into these really high trust relationships, and what sometimes disables those high trust relationships is the fact that you've got this contract or these outcomes hanging over your head, and you're like, well, I've got to answer to the man. We quite often talk about the man at work these days, and if I'm not reaching these outcomes, like I need these people to hurry up and you need to place make now, and you don't have the time to go through those relationship making and enable that trust to happen. And that's even more so if you're working in Indigenous with Indigenous people, so Māori and or Pacifica, because that's who we are. You need the whanaungatanga to happen, to even before you can move beyond the kitchen table. So I was saying to someone the other day, anyway, don't worry about that. That's a complete different thing. But yeah, so high trust relationships, and just the fact that we are sometimes bound by these contracts and money, and we spend a lot of time pushing back on contracts and saying, no, this is the way you're going to give us the money, and this is the way in which we're going to do it. So I encourage everyone else to do that too.